Greetings all, and welcome to the podcast, Why Are You Sober? I am the host, Sam, a sober addict, and as always, I'm really glad that you all are here. Why Are You Sober is a space where sober addicts come to tell their stories of addiction, tell where it took them, where they've been, how they got sober, and then why they continue to choose sobriety today. The hope is that this will spread some experience, strength, and joy out there to either other sober addicts or people who are looking to get sober. If you are a sober addict and would like to come on and tell your story, I would love that. You can get in touch with me at my website, which is whyareyousober.org, or you can email me directly at sam@whyareyousober.org. Or if you're somebody who has some questions, maybe looking for some resources or for some help, you can also reach out. Please do. Again, that is sam@whyareyousober.org. You can also find me on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. So last week, we had my wonderful friend Kathara on, and I'm telling you guys, she is an incredible person. And I hope that you loved her story as much as I do. And this week, we have another blast from the past for me. This week, we have a dear friend of mine who we used to work with together a long time ago. Her name is Barbara. Actually, she used to be a boss of mine. And several years ago, she suddenly saw me post about how I was a few years sober. And when I first got sober, I didn't really post anything on any social media. I kept it really private and for myself, which was because it was for myself. And I just didn't want distractions from a lot of people. And so I waited about 2 years until I finally posted about getting sober. And I am really pleased that I did that. But one of the wonderful things was that all of a sudden, this wonderful woman came back into my life. And she said, "Hey, guess what? Welcome to the club." And I loved reconnecting with her. And so our talk today, there's a lot of stuff that I was realizing had gone on while we were working together. And so it was really fun to kind of reconnect and just support each other, as that's what this is all for. So all that to say, this is my friend Barbara's story. I'm so glad she's here, and let's start out with the serenity prayer. Good and gracious friend, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Welcome to the podcast, Why Are You Sober?
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Yes. So it's so fun. I guess you and I probably haven't spoken to each other in almost 15 years. I mean, really talking to each other. Maybe even a little bit longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely right.
I know. So I guess where do we begin would be, what is your addiction? Or really, what was the primary addiction that brought you into sobriety?
So I am definitely an alcoholic. It was always for me alcohol, and it was. I grew up in a family where my father was an active alcoholic who he never got sober. He died in his disease, and I knew from an early age that I was going to be susceptible to alcohol. But I made different choices and fell victim to the disease anyway.
Yeah. So then growing up, what was that like for you? Yeah.
Yeah, so he was an emotionally abusive alcoholic, and he was just a steady drinker, and it just you kind of never knew which dad was going to show up, and you really never had that sense of peace and comfort because the addiction was always there. I remember in college I started going to Al-Anon, thinking, I was going to deal with my father's alcoholism. And two things about that are kind of funny, not funny. One was that I would go out drinking after. So perhaps I hadn't quite gotten the concept. The second is that I had some Al-Anon literature in my room, and my father went ballistic. Like, how dare you call me out on my disease?
Oh,
and so that was a little rough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. So, but otherwise, besides that, do you think that like growing up was pretty normal, or like?
No, I mean, it was my normal, but
Yeah.
in hindsight, it definitely wasn't normal, and
Yeah.
it definitely was not, calm and peaceful. And
Yeah.
it was, whether, we can sit here and say whether it's the genetics or growing up in the environment, but they both contributed to the
Yeah.
alcoholic that I became. Yeah.
Absolutely. So then you said during college is when you started to go to Al-Anon.
Yeah, and it's really when my drinking started to, I mean, from the first time I drank differently than other people.
Mm-hmm.
Where even in, like, I wasn't a party person in high school. I was kind of square, as they would say. I was like an honor student. I had geeky friends. I was involved in my church. Like, I just didn't do that stuff. And then I went off to college and I started to, again, when I drank, I just drank differently. Other people didn't, drink to the same excess. They didn't have the consequences. They didn't have the loss of spiritual values. Like, I just, what, once I put alcohol in me, it was different than
Mm.
other people. And it just, I mean, I graduated college. I went on to get a master's degree. Like, I did things, but I always had, I always drank more than others. I always drank to, and I also didn't always know. Sometimes I could drink in control, and sometimes I drank to excess. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I never knew which was going to show up for me. And I think sometimes that prolonged the time it took me to find recovery,
Mm-hmm.
because I could sometimes drink in control. And so I was like, "Oh, I'm just unduly alarmed. Like, I'm not really, because I can stop." But I
Yes.
couldn't but I couldn't stay stopped. And that's what made me an alcoholic.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I remember I could get like a week or two, even like a month. But then once I started again, I was right back where I was before.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt
Yeah.
about it. No doubt about it. Or worse, like, your disease has been hanging out, knitting, waiting for you,
Yeah.
and it picks up right where you left off.
Oh yeah. It's just been patiently waiting for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So when do
Absolutely.
you feel like it started to cause a problem in your life? When do you yeah, so that's the question. When do you feel like it started to be a problem?
There were just kind of little episodes and signposts along the way where
Mhm.
I would have times where I drank to the point where someone had to take care of me, to get me home, to clean me up, I would wake up in the morning with dry heaves, and it would take me kind of a long time to get ready and get myself to work. And I was less than productive at work because I was hungover. Like,
Mhm.
it just started to, like, escalate. And then I would say, I tried the geographical cure. We moved from one state to another, and I kind of was like, oh, I'm just not going to be an alcoholic in this new state, which, of
Mhm.
course,
Oh yeah.
of course,
Oh
yes,
yeah.
of course. And it just kept progressing and progressing. And it didn't, I ended up working for a person who was a dry drunk. So he was not emotionally sober, but he didn't drink alcohol. And so that kind of toxic relationship really escalated my problems with my disease. And so
Ooh.
while I was in that other state, I kept having these episodes of, like, loss of spiritual values, doing things to my family that I
Mhm.
would not do in a normal mental state. And it was in the middle of kind of one of those that I kind of confessed and told my husband that I needed help.
Mm.
I I passed out. I woke up and said, I need help. And I actually checked myself into a rehab.
Mm.
And but before then, I would say, even before we moved to that new state, I had gone to AA in 2003, and I tried twice in 2005. And I learned enough about alcoholism that it kind of ruined my drinking for, like, the next 5 years, because
Mm.
I kind of knew I was drinking alcoholically and I was doing it anyway. And I don't know why I didn't get sobriety then. and I don't know why, other
Mm.
than the gift of desperation that I got it when I did. So my sobriety date is May 30th, 2010. So
Okay.
I'm rounding the corner on 13 years of
Yeah.
sobriety,
Wow.
and is a miracle because, like I said, up until that point, I remember so distinctly being at a meeting, talking to a woman, and she could hear me talking myself into my next drink.
Yes. Oh,
And
I
she,
have been there.
and she said, like we do, go ahead, go out and try to do some controlled drinking and see how it works out. And I just remember being so mad at her, so mad.
Yeah.
And to this day, I've never seen her ever again. She has no idea that she had put this like seed in my head in 2005 that
Yeah.
didn't fully germinate until and again, on paper, I looked like I have a doctorate, I had a good job, I had a nice house, two
Mm-hmm.
kids, a
Mm-hmm.
husband,
Mm-hmm.
two, like they say, two cars in the driveway. But I was spiritually empty. I was doing things and being a person that is not the person that I am.
Yeah.
And when I checked myself into this facility, the women at that facility said they had never seen anyone look so sad, which is
Oh.
saying a lot considering.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
I thought I had lost everything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because to this day, my husband, when it comes around to my sobriety anniversary, he says, "Are we supposed to like celebrate or do anything?" And I was like, kind of not, because while I celebrated as the like happiest day of my life, right? It's the first day of the rest of my sober life.
Yeah.
It kind of was a crappy day for him.
Oh yeah. I totally understand that because I'm like October 3rd, so that's the morning I got out of jail. Like for
Yeah.
you know.
That's right. It's not this happy, joyous day. Like it
Yeah.
was the day that I checked myself into rehab, and
Yep.
like everything that my husband thought our lives was are built on wasn't.
Yeah.
And so we had to kind of start from scratch. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So Barbara, throughout your story, you've been saying a loss of spiritual values. Now, for
Mhm.
listeners who may not understand what that means, what is your definition of that?
So it is doing and saying, it's being deceitful,
Mm.
cheating, lying,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hiding, right? Someone says, "How many glasses of wine have you had?" And I'd be like, "Oh no, I'm only on my first glass." Meanwhile, you've already opened the second bottle, hid the empty of the first bottle, and are kind of planning how you're going to dispose of all your empties so that nobody knows what you've done.
Yeah.
That to me is like
Yes.
that is
Yeah.
that's that is an example of like people are asking you questions and you are flat out lying. I mean, I was always like I love to cook, and so I would get home from work, I would open the bottle of wine, I would drink wine while I was cooking, and again, I would open the second bottle and everyone would think I was still on the first bottle. And I have in my apron that I still use today a cork, and it's just a wine bottle cork, and it reminds me of how I used to hide my drinking, because I had to hide the cork in my apron so that nobody knew that it was, my second or third bottle that night.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, those totems that we hold on to.
Hmm.
I had a drink token that was from my last night or last time of drinking, where
Hmm.
I was at a bar where they were doing buy one get one free. So
Nice.
yeah, that's where I ended my drinking. And I always joked about how what a terrible alcoholic I was because I left with a free drink token. Like
Who does that?
yeah, exactly. I'm like, what kind of alcoholic does that? And when I got my car out of the impound a couple days later, the drink token was sitting in the little pocket of the door where the door handle is. It was just sitting in there. And
Mhm.
I left it in there for the entire first year of my sobriety. So that every
Nice.
time I got in the car, I would be like, okay, remember where you got to. Like, I eventually did discard it, but I do think those are important for ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I I remember when we were getting ready to sell the house that was in that other state and come back to where I grew up, um, we started cleaning out a storage area in that house, and I found 2 bottles of wine. Apparently, I had been hiding alcohol and I didn't even remember.
Oh my gosh.
And so and at that point I was sober, and my husband like pulls these 2 bottles of wine out from the storage area and goes, "Is there something you need to tell me?" And I just bust out laughing because it was so ridiculous
Yeah.
that what kind of alcoholic hides the alcohol and then doesn't remember that? Well, of course we don't remember, but
Yeah.
the fact is I wasted 2 bottles of wine that I
Yeah.
had hidden that I didn't even know were there.
That's terrifying and
It's a little
and
terrifying.
hilarious too.
Oh,
I mean,
only
that's the
to
thing.
other alcoholics is it funny, really.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I have a memory that I didn't even realize was a memory until after I got sober. But I had an experience when we were working together where I came to work and I wasn't feeling well. And I literally wasn't like, all I thought was that I just wasn't feeling well. And because I had never been hungover before. And I'm remembering that that's actually why I wasn't feeling well. Like,
Huh.
and we were going, like, we had a staff meeting, and you and another coworker kept being like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I
Okay.
really don't feel well. Like, I don't know what happened." And I literally, like, I was being honest. Like, I didn't, but like looking back, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was the first time I was actually hungover." Like,
Oh, wow. That's so funny.
I know. And I was just like, wow, okay, well, that kind of like coincided together. but,
That's funny.
but yeah, like, and that's the thing is, I look back on a lot of those times and, you just have to laugh. Like, I mean,
No doubt. No
yeah.
doubt.
Yeah. So, before you got sober, there were moments when you yourself were like, maybe I'm an alcoholic, and you went to meetings um, but did you have anybody else in your life trying to be like pointing it out to you? Or other things I've asked people is, did you say things to people and they were like, no, you're not like,
You know, there was another couple that my husband and I hung around with, and they drank like I drank. And so um when there were periods of time when I would try to moderate my drinking, or when there were times where I was like, "Oh, I'm not drinking right now," they would question my decision to not drink or not drink as much as I used to, because if I was questioning my drinking, it meant they had to question theirs. And so they were like, "Oh, no, you're fine. Like, how could you don't have a problem with drinking because you drink like we drink and we're fine." It's so it was there really wasn't anyone in my life that was sober and saying, "Hey, Barbara, you might have a problem." I mean, to a certain extent, my husband was like, why can't you stop?" Like it never dawned on him. He's not one of us. He doesn't have an addiction to alcohol. He can
mhm.
leave a half a glass of something. He can't leave half a pizza though. And so that was the first time, as I was trying to explain, like, he can't leave a half a pizza. And it's, again, you don't get pulled over driving for
Yeah.
having eaten too much pizza.
Yeah.
You and so it isn't the same, but so there really wasn't anyone who was, and like I said, the people who I was near, most of them were drinking like I was. So if I questioned my drinking, they had to question theirs.
Yeah, yes. That's a lot of the experiences for myself was when I would bring
Hmm.
it up to loved ones or well, I never really brought up to family, but friends and people, they would be like, "No, you just overdid it last night. You're fine.
Yeah, you're
Like, don't
fine.
worry about it." Yeah.
You're fine. Yeah.
So, how was it affecting your family, like before you got sober? I mean, I'm
Mhm.
assuming that it was probably noticeable to your kids, correct?
It was actually, I kind of look back at my kind of early years, like the first like 90 days of my sobriety. I got sober when my youngest was 8 and my oldest was 11. And it
Yeah.
was actually the 8-year-old who noticed first and said, you're not buying wine at the grocery store anymore.
Mm.
and and it's really, it was like really eye-opening that they had noticed. I wrote in some of my journaling, like I used to rush through reading bedtime stories
Mm.
because that was standing in the way of me relaxing at night with my glass of wine, my
Mm.
bottle of wine. There were times where like I was going to take a day off from work and we were going to go to the zoo, but I drank too much the night before and I was hungover. And I'd say, "Oh, don't you want to just cuddle in bed and watch movies instead?"
Mm.
No, they wanted to go to the zoo.
Yeah.
Like, I was just, again, I wasn't present. I
Hmm.
wasn't as present as a parent as I wanted to be, and should have been. And so, um, I mean, the good news is that I did get sober while they were still relatively young.
Hmm.
And but they definitely noticed, and there were
Mm.
definitely times where, um, they didn't understand why mommy was acting weird.
Yeah, you don't think they put the connection together at that point?
They didn't, but again, I know that they did. Like I said, the youngest, even at 8, was like, "You're not drinking wine anymore," and
Yeah,
that's when it was like, so it was quite literally sobering to realize how much little eyes watch you.
yeah, yeah. So they weren't aware of the disease, but they were aware like there has been a strong change in mom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So you go to rehab, and what was that experience if you don't mind
No, I
asking?
don't mind. I will say that my roommate, when I got there, had such a startling story that it was what I needed to hear about how progressive and fatal this disease can be. This
Mm.
this person was a long haul truck driver, and she was doing a trip and she came home and her wife had actually sold the house and moved. And yeah,
Oh my
it was,
gosh.
and she had long-term sobriety, but in long haul trucking hadn't been going to meetings, hadn't been doing, the maintenance we need to stay sober. And so she decided she was going to go to a bar and have a Diet Coke. And so the first night she goes and has a Diet Coke. The second night she goes to the bar and has a Diet Coke. The third night she goes to the bar, has 3 Long Island iced teas, and wakes up 3 months later from a coma. Like, hands down, like
Oh my
that.
gosh. Yeah.
And
It's terrifying.
it's the insanity that precedes the first drink. Like, she knew that she was talking herself in to drinking. And um it was, I mean, I I was all in. I was gonna do whatever was asked of me. The For me, the jig was up. It was like
Hmm.
there was no going back. I took a medical leave from my job. I was inpatient for I think about 2 weeks, and then I did an outpatient program for 6 weeks. I did. I followed all of the suggestions, and it was it was a life. I mean, we had to fight with my insurance company to get it all covered, but it was covered. It was a gift.
Yeah.
And even after I got out of the program, every morning they had a morning AA meeting there, and I went to that meeting so that I could give back to the people who helped me,
Hmm.
get and stay sober.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
so great. So then once you left, what was the adjustment like for the family?
It actually that became okay, except that, as I had mentioned earlier, I was working for a person who was a dry drunk. And
Mm-hmm.
so, within the first year of my sobriety, with the help of my sponsor, who I talked it over with, it was time for me to find a new job
Yeah.
because the toxic environment was not a healthy one. And so, really, the adjustment was that I had to change jobs again, and we moved. And as it happened, my husband stayed in that state that we were in, and I and the kids moved back east. And we had several years where we were a married couple, an intact family, but we were living separately. And if you had ever told me in like when I was getting sober that we would do that and survive, it was
Mm,
amazing.
mm,
And and then when he was able to come back here for work, that was really when we began to work on being a family
mm-hmm.
together again.
Now, now, do you think that separation was helpful?
um yeah, I think so, because I could focus on the work that I needed to do and not always feel kind of torn between, because very early after I got out of rehab and I was going to 90 AA meetings in 90 days, my husband would say, like, well, what time's the meeting? Well, what time are you getting home? Well, and
Yeah.
he had
Yeah.
every right to do that, because I was doing, when I was in my disease, I was going around places and doing things, and
Yeah.
so there was this kind of pull of, like, not always wanting to be out at night, and feeling like um I couldn't always go out because I should be, home, and being, so it was good to be kind of apart and be able to work on myself for a while and then appreciate what I had when we could be together again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm wondering on for his perspective if it also helped with some healing from his own resentments and his own, just because of us as alcoholics, what we've done to people, like if
You
he
know, I,
if he had some time to just process stuff too.
I mean, I think part of the decision to stay out there was to kind of make sure that it was going to stick,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that I wasn't going to uproot the family again. But part of it too was he's a Taoist. He's a go with the flow kind of guy, and so I don't really think that there was this, like, kind of larger emotional, baggage.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Like once, like I tried to do, like, my amends with him, and he was just like, I don't want to hear it, and I don't need it. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Like, what's done is done, and we kind of, from that point forward. So in
Yeah.
that sense, but it was more like, I mean, I had uprooted us a couple of times, so he just wanted to make sure that, and it has been,
Yeah.
since we've been back. That's been it.
Yeah. What a gift of that
Mhm.
he was already like, hey, it's over. It's gone.
It's
Like
over.
I'm not holding on to anything, which is
Yeah.
that's so which is why he is your partner.
Yeah.
I
No, it's
mean,
definitely has been definitely been a blessing for sure.
yeah, so now with the rest of your family, what has that been like for you to be sober with them, to have people in your family who have been alcoholics?
So, I mean, my dad passed away, and
Yeah.
so I don't have to kind of draw attention to the fact that I'm not drinking, because I don't, he's not here with us anymore. And yeah, there just isn't anybody in my family who's an active drinker, or who is noticing that I am or am not drinking. And so
Okay.
that's and because I changed jobs, like, the people who knew me as a drinker at that job, when I came here and started a new job, these people just know me as, oh, she doesn't drink.
Yep.
Like, I never had to explain that I did, and now I don't.
Yeah,
Like, they
isn't
just have always known me as a non-drinker.
yeah. Yeah, isn't that a wonderful thing when you finally get someplace where you're like, I'm literally just starting all over and this is awesome.
That's right. And nobody knows that I used to
Yeah.
and that I don't anymore.
Yeah. And if it comes up, it comes up, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, so what have you talked about with your kids now since getting sober? And I mean, I'm assuming they're probably college later now. Like,
They're 21 and 24.
okay, yeah, so college and later now. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I
absolutely.
can't believe because
Yeah,
I
I know. I
remember
was gonna
them being
them as
very little.
babies,
I remember
very,
being
very little.
very little.
So I
So
mean, I did the kind of first round of, doing my amends when they were young, but the kind of whitewashed version that you would do with young children. And then as they went through their teen and college years, they know I go to meetings, they know I have a sponsor, they know that I don't drink, that I had a problem. And I just have said, you should probably make different choices. Like you should probably, be cautious.
yeah,
And as far as I can tell, they have. I mean, I don't have any recollections of them drinking to excess when they were in high school. Obviously, I wouldn't have seen it in college. I mean, when they both
yeah,
went off to college, they each had one alcohol violation, which is just kind of a rite of passage,
yeah.
right?
It happens. Yeah, it's like
It just
okay,
happens.
like
Right.
you were
But
stupid. We were all stupid. Like
it's right. And so, but it's not as if they had multiple alcohol violations. Like they were one and done. Like, okay, yep, did that, fine. So they just know. I
yeah,
mean, and I hope and pray that whatever I modeled for them will stick so that they don't have to live the 15 or 20 years of hell that I did fighting with whether I had a disease or not.
yeah. Yeah, the young people in my family are all very aware, of what happened to me, and we've talked about it, several times all together. Um, because my family, just like others, have like severe alcoholics in our family in the
Hmm.
past, and I know I am the first one in several generations to actually get sober.
Nice.
Yeah. So, which is nice and sad at the same time, but nice that
Mm.
somebody finally got it. And so, I've been very open when talking with my nieces and nephews about like drinking and our family,
Yeah,
and just being like,
absolutely.
just be smart, guys. Like, and I always tell them, and if you are ever anywhere and you're not sure who to call me
Call me.
because I've been to jail. So
Yeah,
I've done it worse.
yeah.
um, but I remember one time this one young man in my life noticed that I wasn't drinking and everybody else was. And he made a comment and he goes, "Why aren't you?" And he was around 11 years old. And I remember trying to be like, how is he going to understand this? And I said, I said, the Hulk? And he goes, yeah. I said, who is the Hulk when he's not the Hulk? And he goes, Bruce Banner. I said, yeah.
Right.
So I'm Bruce Banner right now. But when I drink alcohol, I become
I'm
the
the
Hulk.
Hulk.
And he was like, oh. And I'm like, and it's not good. And he's like,
It's not
oh,
pretty.
okay. And that was it. And he got it. I was like, that's amazing. But he totally understood, you
That's a
know?
great story. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was thinking about that when you were talking about, when we were talking about you talking with your girls, about how to explain it and understand it for young people, because it can be difficult,
Yeah, absolutely.
to grasp it. I mean, it's even difficult, like you were saying with your husband, like of just
Yeah.
being like,
Like not understanding, like not having an off switch.
yeah. I related to when I finally got sober, I explained it to people like I was breathing underwater. I said
Mm.
it's impossible. It felt impossible to me, but it actually
Hmm.
is happening, and that was the closest I could relate it to.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, Barbara, it comes to the end of the question of, so why are you sober today? Why do you stay sober?
I stay sober because I have a life that is so much better than I ever could have imagined. I mean,
Mm,
when I was drinking, I couldn't imagine what life would be like without drinking. And I have a life that is, really second to none. I have a job. I have a boss that is respectful. He knows about me and respects that. And I feel seen, and I can be my authentic self,
Mm.
and I'm not exhausted at the end of the night wondering what lie I had to cover up. I don't have to wonder where my pocketbook is. Like, I just, you know,
Yeah.
I don't go to bed feeling like there are things undone or things that I have to undo tomorrow. Like, I just can, and I can have an authentic relationship with my higher power because I I can be honest about kind of where I'm feeling. I have a great fellowship of people, women who I can call and who I can share, my struggles. And it's just amazing that I could have this gift. I don't,
Mm.
I, the, the obsession to drink was lifted. Every once in a while, a thought flits through, and I just think, why? Like, what's on the other end of that? Nothing. Nothing compared to what I have now.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you
No
so much for
worries,
being here.
Sam. Glad to
Absolutely.
be here.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you all so much for listening to my friend Barbara's story. Barbara, as always, thank you so much for being my friend, for being such a supportive, awesome person, and for coming on and telling your story and sharing some experience, strength, and hope with others out there, and hopefully also some joy. So next week, we have my friend Corey, who also comes from my Gordon College and college days, and I'm so glad she's here. She and I have wonderfully stayed connected over the past few years, so bringing her on was an easy choice for me, and I'm so glad she's here to share her story. So, as always, if you are a sober addict and would like to come on, please get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me at my website, whyareyoussober.org, or you can email me directly at sam@whyareyoussober.org. And as always, if you're somebody who has some questions or needs some help, please reach out also. So with that, I'm wishing you all a whole lot of peace, love, and joy, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.